Hi, I'm Brian SHIFMAN, President and CEO of the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you all today. Thank you for joining us for our second virtual town hall. I know it's been a pretty intense time, a lot of anxiety. I felt last week's town hall was important to do. And the feedback we got were things like businesses felt a sense of relief knowing that all levels of government are working together. They got further clarity on certain programs and how to access certain funding. And still there is a lot of anxiety. So I think that that provides a good perspective for today's virtual town hall. I did want to thank those who did attend last week, both the viewers at home and also we had MP Sabara, Minister Tabolo, and the Mayor MAURIZIO BEVILACQUA of City of Vaughan. And Mayor, thank you again for coming back. I'm going to introduce all three of our speakers shortly. I did want to say that I do recommend those at home, you should be joining our mailing list. It's on our homepage. At the bottom, it says newsletter, just so you see what we're up to when we're doing other town halls like this one. When you go to the top of our homepage, it says COVID-19 business resources. I recommend you click on that. Go to that page often. It has all the business supports from all levels of government. I don't want you spending your time looking on Google for the latest CRA report or what the municipal government is doing. So just go to one source. I hope that helps you. Please do submit your questions. At this point, I wanted to also thank Render Media for media support on these segments. And I wanted to welcome our guests and thank you at this difficult time for coming. So we have MP Deb Schulte from King-Vaughan, Minister of Seniors. We have MPP Stephen LECCE from King-Vaughan, Minister of Education. And we have Honourable Mayor MAURIZIO BEVILACQUA from the City of Vaughan rejoining us after last week. Thank you for agreeing to do this. And what we're going to do is we'll give you each 5 minutes to do an overview of supports your government is providing. Feel free to talk about, for instance, Minister LECCE, you can talk about what Minister of Education is doing as well within that 5 minutes. And then we'll do a Q&A and I'll direct those questions to each of you for about 2 minutes each. So we're going to start with Minister Schulte, and again, feel free to talk about your seniors portfolio as well.
Thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your virtual town hall today. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us, and I hope you're all staying safe and employing those good social distancing measures. And I also, Brian, want to thank the Chamber. The work that you do is really quite exceptional and really very important, supporting business. And giving everyone this opportunity to get together on the virtual town hall is really fantastic. So thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming.
So today as Minister of Seniors, I'd like to speak about how the Government of Canada is supporting seniors, individuals and businesses. And just a little bit about for seniors. To date, we've implemented several measures that aim to address some of the challenges that they face. For low-income seniors and modest and low-income Canadians, we've provided a supplementary payment. It's just coming shortly in another week of the GST credit, and it'll be close to $400 for single adults and $600 for a couple. And that's going to provide a significant amount of help for those that are facing some additional costs. We have reduced mandatory withdrawals from the registered retirement income funds by 25%, and this will help preserve RIF assets as the market's bouncing up and down. We're also allowing any new taxes owed to be deferred until August 31st. So that's the 2019 taxes owing can be deferred now until August 31st. And we've extended the tax filing income until June the 1st. So tax filing deadline, to June the 1st. We've also provided $9 million more, in addition to the $50 million that we have for New Horizons for Seniors programs. This is helping community groups on the ground assist our seniors during this difficult time. Many of them are afraid to come out of their homes. They are more vulnerable and more susceptible to the negative outcomes of this pandemic. So we need to provide more support, and we're doing that with some additional money on the ground to those support organizations. Despite our progress, we know there's more work to do, so stay tuned. I'd like to turn now to the Government of Canada's support for individuals and businesses during this public health crisis. our government is unwavering in our commitment to support Canadians, the healthcare system, and our economy. Through Canada's COVID-19 Economic Response Plan, we're focused on providing immediate help to those Canadians and businesses that are most in need. And this is through a wide range of support that will help ensure Canadians can pay for their rent, their groceries, and help businesses continue to pay their employees and their bills during this time of uncertainty. To support workers and their families, we created a Canada Emergency Response Benefit. For short, we call it the CERB. And nearly 6 million Canadians have already signed up. So we have a huge, just in a week. So that's pretty incredible when you think of the number of people that had to get online and apply for those benefits and are now receiving those benefits within the week. That was quite exceptional. I'm very proud of the government for being able to do that. So nearly 6 million Canadians are either self-employed or do not have enough hours to qualify for EI. And there's another 5.5 million that are on EI. So you can see how many people are accessing government benefits at this time. This benefit for the emergency response benefit will mean that workers, including the self-employed who are unable to work because of COVID-19, have the income support that they need. Canadians should be confident their jobs are safe as we continue to fight the global COVID-19 outbreak. The government's helping Canadian businesses protect jobs and pay their bills by providing up to 75% wage subsidy for qualifying employers for up to 3 months through the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And this is the new one that was just announced this week, allowing businesses to defer their GST and HST payments and custom duties until the end of June. We launched the new Canada Emergency Business Account to help provide interest-free loans to small businesses and not-for-profits. And we are providing SMEs with guaranteed loans to help cover operational costs. These new measures will provide immediate help to Canadian businesses so they can weather the impacts of COVID-19. And this builds on our work so far to expand work sharing, launch the Business Credit Availability Program, and stabilize our financial markets. Our government will continue to do whatever is necessary to support workers and businesses and our economy as we deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is just the beginning, and our government will be there with Canadians as we address this crisis. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to question period.
Thank you, Minister Schulte. So now we'll before we do Q&A, we're going to turn it over to Minister LECCE for an overview of provincial government supports and your portfolio.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you to Deb and Maurizio and to everyone watching. Just a quick shout out to you and the Chamber for doing amazing work over the past weeks, and a recognition that the spirit of our province is strong. I know that many small businesses in the community are facing challenges. And I think what's amazing is that we're all coming together as governments working with one mission, which is to make sure that you are able to be prosperous and able to sustain the difficulty ahead. Just first off, on the health side of this, this is obviously a global pandemic, and we're working in conjunction with the federal municipal partners to make sure that families are safe. Over $3 billion has been invested in frontline COVID response. Telehealth Ontario is strengthened. We now have testing centers in virtually every region of the province, one at Mackenzie Health and many in the periphery of our community. And so there's a lot being done proactively, as well as working with local health authorities to make sure that we keep families safe. One of the decision points I had to make on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer was the closure of schools, which was the first in the country, which I think in part of a variety of measures made by all governments would have saved a lot of lives to mitigate community spread. So, you know, the health elements really are top of mind for us and very sobering given the challenges we face in this province. But the economic challenges also are very much on our mind, because we want to make sure that people are able to work and small businesses are able to persevere through this process. And so there's a variety of supports we've announced, one of which that I think is top of mind is a 50% cut in the off-peak hours of hydro. I think hydro rates are one way the provincial government has a lever to provide immediate stimulus. That's making a difference. There's roughly $3.7 billion in direct supports we announced in our COVID action plan that's going to help small business. I'm just going to go through a few of them. The first is providing flexibility when it comes to the tax obligations, providing an additional 6-month grace period, interest-free for small businesses to file. That is going to help, given that the next month or perhaps this quarter will be challenging for them. The second is for WSIB, we're deferring payments for up to 6 months. That alone is going to save just shy of $2 billion for small business, $6 billion in savings by the deferral on taxes. On the employer health tax, we've more than doubled that, which will help literally tens of thousands of small businesses in the province, given that challenge. And so there's a lot that we're doing in the context of our economic response. The Premier has been very clear, whatever it takes. And so today will be really informative also to hear your ideas and Chamber ideas about how we can work together with the feds and the municipal partners to get this right and keep you not just employed, but keep your family safe. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Minister LECCE. Now I'll turn over to Honourable Mayor MAURIZIO BEVILACQua. Thanks again for joining us this week, and I'll turn it to you.
Brian, thank you so much for inviting me to really share in the experiences that we at all levels of government are having with Deb and Stephen and so many others. And I guess today the context is the 12,000 businesses that produce over 225,000 jobs here in the city, and how we can collectively work together to alleviate some of the concerns that they have, and these are serious concerns. You know, the other day I was asked why I decided to cancel the Canada Day celebrations here in our city, and why I had to declare a state of emergency early on in the process. I did that because we are in a marathon, not a sprint. This is going to take a while to get through, and it gives us certainty in some ways, because we know that COVID-19 is real. COVID-19 is spreading. We also know that COVID-19 is creating deaths here in throughout the world and in our cities. And I also think that we're very clear about the adverse effect that it's having on the economy, which means that we have to face that reality head on. There is no other way to deal with this crisis. And the narrative has been about the uncertainty, whereas I, as mayor of the city, now I'm shifting that narrative into the certainty that I actually stated. And I'll tell you why that's important. Because it's important because we need to look now at a post-COVID world, and what is it going to look like, and trying to bring the future to the present, and so that we can envision collectively how we're going to deal with this. You know, early on in this COVID crisis, we opened our operations center, declared a state of emergency. We changed bylaws to facilitate the movement of trucks, so that we can restock the shelves. We suspended late fee charges on taxes. We eliminated the VAT, which is a tax. As you know, it affects tourism here in the city and the hospitality industry. We've taken a lot of measures to make sure that the business community was well served. Above and beyond that, because of the collaborative state between the federal, provincial, and municipal government, we kept our services and economic development open. Why? Because people will come to the municipal government for services that may be offered at the provincial or federal level. The reality is that here in the city of Vaughan, we have an incredible collaborative spirit that has really defined the political climate here. And so Stephen and Deb and I work extremely close together to make sure that A, we contain the virus, B, we take care of the health of people, obviously, and C, that we are dealing with the needs of small businesses every day. And so there's a lot of exchange of information taking place between our offices, and also at the Premier's office and the Prime Minister's office. And and my office as well, because we know that we need to work together. But I do think that collectively we are beginning to shift our focus to a post-COVID world. It's extremely, extremely important. And at this point in time, it may seem premature, but I do believe that unless you're able to define what the post-COVID world is going to look like, it's very hard to take measures to address it. There's the containment. Now that we have to figure out how is the workplace going to look like. 80% of the people in my planning department and 80% of our legal department now is working from home. COVID has imposed that discipline on us. What does it look like in the future? I mean, there are so many lessons that COVID has given us at the municipal, federal, and provincial level. And you, as head of the chamber, I'm sure you have noticed how small businesses in our city have pivoted. They are now producing products and providing services that are required to fight COVID. And one thing I will say about the small business community here in our city, they have an indomitable spirit. They have the great capacity to come back. This should not be underestimated. The psychological state of the small business people here in our city is something that we need to highlight. I have seen people come back. There have been crises before. Will it be the same after COVID? No, it will not. The whole paradigm is going to be shifted. People are going to think of the workplace and processes in a very different way. And so this broad perspective that I'm presenting to you today is something that needs conversation and also needs a lot of effort on all our parts. And as individual Canadians and as individual citizens of Vaughan and King in this case, we have ultimately also a responsibility to see what role we as individuals want to play in this. So overall, there's a lot of services for small businesses right across the board. We play a facilitating role in many. As you know, the province and the federal government is injecting a lot of funds in a lot of investments in the economy, which makes it very different from past crises where there was a shrinking of liquidity. When we come out of this, because there's been a lot of funds directed to the economy, I think that we will be able to respond quicker than we did in the past. So I leave you with that message of hope, but also a realistic message, which is we are in a marathon, not a sprint.
Well, I agree with you for sure on that. Thank you all. You know what? I want to go back to the mayor, and I'm going to rotate around and ask this question because it's a follow-up to what you just said. One of our questions that was submitted to us is that many manufacturers in Vaughan have already repurposed their production to make items such as ventilators and masks and gloves. And you referenced that, and that's very important work. We want to thank them. How can companies contact each level of the respective government to assist in the cause, and how does the process for repurposing actually work? So maybe we can start with you, Mr. Mayor, and then go to MPP LECCE and MP SCHULTE.
I must tell you here again, the municipal government plays a facilitating role. So people will contact us. As you all know, the closest government to the people is obviously the municipal government. This is what the people relate to. But I can tell you that both the provincial and federal government have been very active on this particular file. They've let you know as head of the Chamber of Commerce and Chambers of Commerce right across the board and export alliances. They've done an excellent job of getting the message out. At times, it requires clarification. You have to remember that some of these programs did not exist 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. It's going to take a little bit of time to transition, and people need to be patient. Having said that, it is only 4 or 5 weeks, right? So in an economic cycle, you will find that people have to respond to all sorts of externalities that face them every day in business. So what I will say to you is that a lot of the funding is originating from the federal and provincial governments, and our role has been to facilitate. The good news in the city of Vaughan is that there are many, many examples of, and we've seen it, many examples of companies that are now working to create hand sanitizers, that are now working to provide the type of products that are required during this COVID-19 crisis. What does that say? It means that our businesses in the city of Vaughan are flexible, they're nimble, and they're adjusting well, which is a good sign for a future recovery. But let's make no mistake about it. The reality is that all businesses need to adapt that type of style, because the certainty of this uncertainty is the fact that people will have to pivot very, very quickly. But COVID-19 was a great test for the city of Vaughan to see how resilient our business community was. And as you correctly stated, Brian, it is indeed a resilient business community that can pivot very quickly.
Minister LECCE?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's just to build on what the mayor was saying, there's really an incredible amount of small businesses, nonprofits, really small and large enterprises within our community that have incredibly stepped up to help with the fight to combat COVID-19. A notable one is Woodbridge Group, which you will know that produced the first 1,000 masks that will be built in this province right here in the city of Vaughan, and that's awesome. That's something we should be proud of as Canadians and as residents of this community. There's organizations, there's also schools like St. Michael the Archangel that's building 3D masks and producing masks with their 3D printers. So really neat work being done, incredible heroism at Humanity First and others. So the point is, we should be proud of the dynamic community that exists within Vaughan. With respect to how manufacturers could help with this problem, we've launched a central portal called Ontario Together, and that really is to centralize procurement and to come up with various solutions to the challenges we face. Right now, many employers have reached out to all levels of government to say, how can I help? So if you have an idea, you have something you'd like to bring forth, masks, ventilators, critical PPE or other equipment that could be consequential for the supply chain, please immediately put your idea forth on Ontario Together. You will be contacted by someone within that division to reach out to understand how that could work. There's a variety of small businesses in Vaughan doing their part in the auto sector, among others. We've also just launched a $50 million Ontario Together Fund, which is essentially an enabling fund. If there's some capital cost to retool your facility or your shop to get them ready for production of this essential material or the PPE, for example, then that fund will be made available for you based on application. So it's essentially, the website is ontario.ca/Ontario Together, and it shouldn't take long, but you should hear from them within a week.
Thank you. And Minister Schulte?
Thank you very much. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that have already been said before I talk about where we have our central clearinghouse for this kind of information. First, the mayor talked about the excellent working relationship at all levels of government, and I just want to re-emphasize that. I'm very privileged to have the opportunity to work with Mayor BEVILAQUA and Minister LECCE. We have had lots of conversations about how we can work even better together. We've always worked well together, but we are even stepping that up now just to make sure that as people call our offices and ask for help, we are expediting as quickly as possible that help to people at the different levels of government. It truly is a Team Canada approach. So I just wanted to, again, thank my colleagues for being here on this virtual meeting with me, and also working so well with me to make sure that we can serve our communities well. When it comes to the businesses in both Vaughan and King, it's been really incredible to see how they've stepped up. We talk about our community being extremely generous, and the spirit of generosity, as the mayor always says, is what sets our communities apart, or what our city apart. I feel that also in King, but you've really seen it in action now with people stepping up and finding their supplies and delivering them up to York Region, to the hospital, to healthcare needs in our community, making sure that nothing goes to waste. But you're also seeing it in terms of the entrepreneurship and the ingenuity of the businesses in our cities of King and Vaughan, how they've stepped up to try to solve some of these problems that we've had. So for public health, we have a public services and procurement organization, which is really proactively engaging with the provinces, territories, and businesses and industry, helping to try to find out who's got the best ideas, who can get to market faster, and try to consolidate our purchase of the required emergency supplies and services. We've got Public Health Agency of Canada speeding up their approval of testing kits, ventilator designs. We've really gone into super drive, which is really nice to see that when it's needed, we can certainly do it. So these are the things that we've been doing to try and assist companies to actually deliver the resources that they're trying to deliver for the community. So any potential supplier or individual with helpful information on supporting the COVID-19 response, they're encouraged to visit buyandsell.gc.ca and /calling all suppliers, help Canada combat COVID-19. And so if you've got anything you've got to offer, that's the clearinghouse, the central clearinghouse. As you can understand, we'd have to have one place for this all to come in or things would get dropped. So that's where we'd like you to go and let us know what you have to offer and what creative solutions you have for the problems that are in place today. Thank you.
Thank you all. You know, I do agree with you. It has been a united approach from all levels of government, and government's certainly moving quicker than it's ever been used to before. And we did want to commend the businesses in Vaughan that have repurposed some of their manufacture. We've heard from a lot of them. Some of them have gone through the chamber and gotten in touch with the municipality or the province in particular. One of the questions we got though is we know that we're not ready to start reopening things yet. We have seen that in Spain, they're in a different stage of the curve. So they've started to slowly reopen aspects of the economy. And when Canada gets to that stage, business is anxious, well, prioritizing safety. So we wanted to ask each of you what your government strategy is for slowly bringing people back to work once the infection rates begin to drop. Can we start with you, Minister Schulte?
Sure. As you mentioned, Brian, not everybody is at the same place in terms of the pandemic. Many countries are ahead of us in terms of the virus, impact in their communities. We're obviously looking very closely at what other countries are doing as they're reopening their economies. We have said, and I think you heard the Prime Minister yesterday talk to this, we've said that we are still many weeks away from actually loosening any of those measures that we've had to put in place. And it really is very much up to each individual person and businesses on how they help us quickly get through this pandemic. There will be subsequent waves. That is, until we get a vaccine, there's no way that we can protect people apart from practicing physical distancing, not social distancing, but physical distancing. And the mayor said very rightly that this has opened up opportunities for the way we may need to go forward in a different way to really implement physical distancing in a more long-term way. And it's going to be up to people. So if they can help us by staying home and keeping that physical distancing, stopping the transmission, then we will get through this more quickly and we'll be able to start re-implementing and reinvigorating our economy. So we are looking at the different models on how you would do that, but the when is still up in the air for us here in Canada because we're not through the peak yet, and so we have a little ways to go before we start doing that. So we don't have any solid, here's the date we're shooting for. Every time we've had an idea, it's had to move, and we are still needing to practice very strong social distancing to physical distancing to get through this peak and make sure that we don't overwhelm our public health system.
Okay, fair enough. Minister LECCE, and also maybe you could sort of dovetail the answer with, there are aspects of government that have been moved to an online platform to enable people to enable government to continue to function. When I think about tribunal decisions or perhaps dropping off documentations or attending meetings. So can you tell us about your government strategy for eventually reopening, or are we in the same place as, obviously we take direction from the federal government, and certain divisions that might be open right now online to keep government and help business in that way?
Absolutely. The priority, obviously, in the immediate term is the health and safety of the public. I mean, we're still dealing with an outbreak that is global, that has seen just too many lives lost in the province, let alone across the country. So that is priority number one. But I think you're right. I mean, look, in the month of March, over 1 million jobs were lost in this country, over 400,000 in this province. So we face an economic challenge, there's no doubt. And it requires us to be thinking the short to maybe medium term about how we ensure the economy grows and we rebound, not just from an economic perspective, we get people working. Incomes and household finances depends on government's ability to restore economic growth in the country. And so two things. The first is the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario will guide Cabinet's advice and decisions on when we reopen the economy more and more. The essential service list has shrunk from 70 to 40 sectors of the economy. Over time, based on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, obviously that list can expand and more people can work. But that's going to be a phased-in approach led in part by the Minister of Finance, Rod Phillips, who announced the Economic Recovery and Job Creation Committee. That's a cabinet committee that's focused on how we get people back, how we restore growth in the economy, and how we ultimately ensure particularly small businesses that are already facing difficulty and perhaps modest margins on a good quarter, a good year, are able to survive. And so that really is the emphasis right now. It's a dual focus on health, but still keeping our finger on the pulse of making sure businesses grow. That's why we've done so many tax deferrals and so many other incentives like hydro relief in the immediate term. With respect to moving services online, yes, Service Ontario and a variety of other services are being provided online. LPATs are being rescheduled through this process, which makes some sense until after the emergency orders is concluded. We've also, for tribunals, Ontario is postponing in-person hearings, but there's alternatives being made, including video and audio and phone-in. So there's a few things we're doing trying to ensure the continuity of government. And in my ministry in education, we've uploaded 2 million students from in-class instruction, one of the largest transformations, at least pedagogically and scholastically in the country, to moving 2 million kids into a virtual learning environment. And so we believe the continuity of services and government must continue. You're paying taxes, you deserve that. And we're going to continue to do better in the context of how we can educate our kids in the safety of their home.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor?
Thank you so much. And I think that many areas that I was going to speak about have actually been covered by Deb and Stephen. I do want to say something, though. As COVID-19 persists, city building continues. We often talk about all the things that are not happening, and sometimes we forget to talk about the things that are happening. For example, Vaughan Hospital is still under construction. It's one of the biggest projects in the history of our city, certainly the biggest in healthcare. And when we consider the fact that we're living in a COVID-19 era, I think that the fact that we are continuing to build this hospital should be something that we should take note of. Of course, part and parcel of city building as well as building a province and a country is that for the business community, they can play a very important role in how we move forward. And this is through establishment of protocols in various industries that are going to say that if these conditions are met, then we can once again start to employ people and start to produce products and services. I think this is a very important role for the business community to play, because it's very consistent with a recovery process. Because sometimes we think that building something is only about actually production of goods and services. Sometimes building a city, building a province and a country is also about setting up the framework for work to take place and production to take place and the recovery to take place. So I think that I would take my lead, obviously, from those who know, the medical officers, the scientists, researchers. But one thing I will say, is that I'm not looking, for example, there was I think, Stephen, it was May 12th that you announced that the state of emergency will still be on. But frankly, we should not be surprised if that gets extended because the conditions, we'll have to figure out how the conditions are going to be on May 12th. And we have to figure out the state of the health state of our province and our city. So this is a moving target, but as I've reiterated many times, is that we have to conserve energy. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And what we need to do is allocate resources accordingly. But I do think that the business community can be quite helpful, as they have, for example, in the reorientation of the industry, like whether it's the auto industry, Stephen, as you were talking about. Look how engaged they are in the fight against COVID-19. So these are ways of moving forward, but we have to do it with our eyes wide open. And I agree with both Deb and Stephen that the number one priority right at this point is the health and well-being of our citizens.
Yeah, for sure. Minister Schulte, what I'm going to do is stay with you now for a couple questions, if that's okay.
Can I just let you did ask a question there, and I would love the opportunity just to
absolutely,
share.
Sure. Yes, please.
Yeah, if you've noticed, the Government of Canada over the last few years has already been moving a lot of its services online because that's the way people want to get service. They don't want to have to come into an office. They want to be able to do it online. Not everybody, but a majority of Canadians have been moving in that direction. And so we have been doing those changes over the last few years. Just recently, we've just moved to soft launch a digital process to apply for a social insurance number. Previously, you needed to come into an office to do that. So we're just doing that now because we know how critical a social insurance number is for everybody to get benefits and to be able to be recognized in the system. So that's just something that we've done recently. And in the past, we created new services like My Business Account in May of 2018 that allows businesses owners and authorized representatives to create their own filing and balance confirmation letters online. So that's a big help. CRA also has been going online and improving their online services with the My Account for individuals, for launching Biz app for small businesses and sole proprietors, and improving email notifications and introducing the Tell Us Once approach, enabling Canada Pension Plan recipients to update direct deposit information for both Employment and Social Development Canada and the CRA, so you don't have to do it in two separate locations. So while this pandemic has shown the way forward, we were already underway in that direction, and so you will see more of that coming as we move more of these labor-intensive applications and initiatives online to serve Canadians better. Thanks.
No, thank you for that. I think that's very important in terms of government continuity. So, Minister Schulte, I'm going to stay with you for a few questions, just to build out the theme. Like, overwhelmingly, what we're hearing from the business community, besides like concern for health and well-being, is issues of liquidity and access to funding, and how do I deal with employees and keep them employed? And we're hearing about rent as well. I just want to focus in with you on the emergency wage benefit. So to build context for our audience, we, like at the Chamber, we saw a 10% wage coverage as source deduction. Then there was a dramatic increase to 75%, which was very welcome by our members. Yeah. That's based on a 30% drop in revenue for March, April, May, year over year. Then March was dropped to 15% drop, which was very positive. And now, though, the anxiety and the questions still remain in terms of when does the portal open? How quickly can I get access to the funding? And can I double up on the 75% and the 10%? So I'll put those to you.
So first question is, when can we get this? I appreciate that the latest changes have been very well received across Canada. The when is as fast as possible. I can't give you the actual date because everybody's working around the clock to try to get this in place. The first thing was to make sure that we got it through Parliament, and that was done over the weekend during a long weekend. We pulled Parliament back and got that passed. I expect it would be very soon, but there are a lot of changes that have to be made to the system to make this work properly. You can only understand how challenging this has been to get the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit in place and working properly, to get the EI handling the kind of numbers of millions of people that are going online and doing this daily. So I just wanted to let you know that it is soon, very soon. So please stay tuned. And that's, I know that's not what people want to hear, but I think what people wanted to hear is that we're being more responsive to their needs, and that we did, got that through, and now it's about delivering it to businesses. And so stay tuned, it's soon.
Well, maybe as a follow-up though, like in the interim, businesses are looking for that $40,000 line of credit that they can get through banks. But we've heard from, I'm summarizing about 15 questions, which basically said, I don't qualify for the $40,000 for various reasons. Usually it has to do with them being sole proprietors, and therefore they're not taking income in a typical year, or in some years, in which case they can't qualify based on the income requirement. Is there are you looking to make amendments to that, or is there something else they can apply for to stay afloat for now?
So we've heard this loud and clear. This is something that we are also discussing to see how we can help all of the businesses in the different states that they're operating. Sole proprietorships are challenging. They can apply for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. They, normally would pay themselves a salary. They're not getting that salary. Their business is closed, so they can apply for the emergency response benefit. It's $2,000 a month. It's not huge, but it's a bit of money there. They can apply for the loans, and we are working on opening up the loan framework so that more businesses can get access to that. It is not done yet, but we are working away at what measures we need to do in addition to what we've already done to help those businesses that are still struggling and need to get through this. Okay, and you mentioned about getting both benefits, yes. The wage subsidy and the wage share. There's a variety of different programs, and each business is going to need to look at their unique circumstances. It's not something we're going to solve on a virtual town hall. I do have my office open still, not open for walk-ins, but open in terms of calls and emails. Please, we're there to help you. Let us work through your details and see if there's a way that we can help. But you're not supposed to be going after the wage subsidy and trying to pay. I think it was one of your questions that you put through to me, and trying to pay your employees less. The work share may be a better program if you're trying to do some of those things. So let us talk to you about your particular circumstances and see how we can help you.
So just to clarify, so you're suggesting they can go on the Chamber's website for the program?
Sure, that's fine too.
You're encouraging them to call your office should they have specific questions like that?
If they have specific questions and they're having trouble getting through to the regular lines, then we're there to help. That's what the office is there to help. Okay,
thank you. Well, I just to clarify, I think because one of the questions that I was asking there was, so you can get a 75% subsidy on employee wages, but there was also the 10% at source deduction. What we understand is you could apply for the 10% now. Later, if you go for the 75, you can only get 65%. Is that correct?
So, Brian, can I get back to you with the specific details on that one? Because there's some subtleties in each of these programs. I want to make sure I'm not giving bad advice, and it is particular on the circumstances. So I think we need to get the details of the business circumstances and work that through individually.
Okay, that sounds great. And when you do, we'll post it for you. We appreciate, because that's one of the common questions we're getting. Now, I'll start with Minister LECCE. The question, it has to do with rent. It is directed at all of you, but we'll start with Minister LECCE. the question we got is companies are still calling for rent deferrals despite all three levels of government saying it's not feasible due to cost consideration and just the enormity of what we're talking about. However, there are jurisdictions both overseas and in Canada, such as Australia and Brampton, that have taken steps such as deferring or waiving rent. Are these options being considered perhaps on a sector-specific basis?
Well, I mean, the Premier has said all options are on the table, but I do think, there is some inherent challenge with operationalizing that, given there's about 1 million enterprises that are probably eligible just in the province of Ontario. But look, we recognize that small business people who are paying rent face costs, and they're being asked to provide a monthly payment to their landlord, notwithstanding no revenue. And in some cases, it's because they've been ordered to close by government. So I appreciate the challenge they're in, which is why we made a variety of ancillary relief from hydro to WSIB to tax deferrals to make life easier for these small business enterprises to exist and to sustain. I guess what I'd say in short, Brian, is we've not unveiled that part of the $17 billion COVID-19 action plan to respond to this challenge yet, but we're obviously listening, and the Chamber's been an advocate for this. We've spoken about this personally over the weekend, so I'll continue to take that back to Minister Phillips and see how we can continue to support these enterprises. If not through a rent subsidy, maybe there's other ways which we can still provide the relief and achieve the same objective, which is the sustainability of the sector.
We appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, at the local level, as you know, our budgets are what they are, and you have to be very realistic. I think, Minister, I believe that in the province of Ontario, something like that would cost almost $50 billion, which, given the fiscal situation today, it's not affordable. I do, however, speak to many landlords in the city of Vaughan, and I encourage them to give some help to these tenants. And it was interesting. Last week, I was talking to somebody who's actually mirroring actions taken by governments with 90 days deferral. Everybody's in it together, because I think the landlords also appreciate that their properties, if they're empties, they're not going to produce any capital for them as well, and any revenue flows. So they're beginning to be quite intelligent about helping the tenants so that the business stays open and they can recoup it thereafter. Those are the tools that basically we have at the municipal level, and of course, with properties that we own and we have some tenants. We are also aiding them during this process as well by waiving fees. But overall, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a challenge. It definitely is a challenge. But we must be mindful of one thing, especially at the federal and provincial government, is the injection of funds. And I know that, and the programs, they're quite substantial. They may have to be increased later on. But as a first step, I think both the federal and provincial governments have responded quite well because the type of money that is being invested in our communities and in the country is really respects the challenge that COVID-19 has created for us. So now the question is, of course, and I think Deb mentioned this. When the program gets started, it takes a little bit of time for the disbursement of funds, but that's natural. We weren't having this conversation 6 weeks ago. These programs did not exist 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So you've got to, people have to be a little bit patient. But where I judge both the federal and provincial government is on whether they're putting resources to address these issues right now. And as a first step, they certainly have. And I say as a first step because we don't know what's going to happen 12 months from now. We don't know what's going to happen 18 months from now. I think a lot of the discussion hinges on us finding a vaccine for COVID-19, and then the conversation will change.
Yeah, no, Agreed. Minister Schulte, I wanted to give you a chance to respond just in terms of the rent question because it's come up so many of our members. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think the mayor, just following on the comments said by my two colleagues, and the mayor hit it on the head. It really is a team approach across all of Canada, trying to pay attention to what's happening with this pandemic. Making sure that for our level of government, it's been about making sure we've got credit and liquidity supports for businesses and for people. And so rather than attacking a particular one issue, which is the loan or the mortgage or the rent, it's because it's a big it's a cascade, right? If you want to forego your rent, then the business that needs that rent to pay the mortgage is in trouble, and then the bank's in trouble. So it's a big cascade. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're putting liquidity in the market with our programs, the loan guarantees, the co-lending programs through EDC and BDC, making sure that we've got the wage subsidy program to help businesses stay afloat, and the new Canada emergency business account. These are things that we're doing to provide that credit and liquidity, which then allows the businesses to pay what they need to pay. And obviously, everybody is in this together. Everybody's going to be taking a hit. So I think the mayor's right to say that everybody needs to work together. So those organizations that are renting those spaces need to put a little water in their wine, so to speak, and everybody's going to have to try to work together to get through this. Governments, businesses, and people. Everybody's got a role to play, and everybody's taking a hit.
Okay. Well, I would ask you all to continue to talk to your levels of government, what further support you can provide in that area or in other areas. But definitely a united approach, and I do feel that our members will see that you are hearing the urgent concerns they're outlining. Mr. Mayor, I wanted to come back to you on the rent aspect in one way, which is, to be quite honest, you've always given me good advice, and I thought it'd be interesting to ask the Vaughan Mayor, if a landlord and a tenant were having a discussion right now, and the tenant was saying, I'm a retailer, I have no meaningful income right now, or I've been forced to close, what that conversation, in your opinion, should sound like to get the landlord and the tenant to be able to work together?
I believe in the truth, and the truth never fails. The reality is that the tenant needs to be very clear to the landlord the challenges that he or she is facing, and that essentially nobody would benefit from him or her closing the business down, because it affects employment, it affects wealth generation in our city. And the landlord also has to understand that ultimately an empty store is not worth very much to him or her. What we need to engage is that spirit of generosity that I often speak about. Look, at the end of the day, what COVID-19 at the individual, community, federal, provincial, business, health, facets of our life, what it really has shown to us is the incredible interdependence that we have. It's not like you could fix it on your own. It's and for example, we talk about small business, but would small business be operating very well if public works in our city wasn't working, if garbage pickups in homes wasn't happening? I mean, the interdependence, our business referral system wasn't working, so they wouldn't be able to access, let's say, federal, provincial programs because, let's say, they lack the awareness. There's an interdependency that COVID-19 has clearly illustrated to all of us. Like the relationship between the levels of government is very different. The relationship between the business community and government is very different. And it's very interesting for business to note, could you imagine a COVID-19 environment without government? And, often there's this debate, what does government do? What do government not do? What role do they really play? Well, the business community now understands that really the governments exist precisely for crises like these. And so there's a greater appreciation. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a greater appreciation by the people you represent, the small business community and the large business community about the role of government now, which is going to redefine how we deal post-COVID-19, on all sorts of issues. Now government in many ways has become more and more important to people's lives because we are establishing and setting the tempo for this recovery. Could you imagine, Brian, if the federal and provincial government would have argued and talked about the deficit and the debt now instead of people's lives and their health or the lives of small business people? Could you imagine if you had governments that said, you know what, we have a deficit to take care of? They didn't. They were wise. What they did, they said, we're going to invest in our people. The health and well-being of our citizens is number one. And we're going to make those investments to inject funding into the economy so that we can get a recovery. So there's a lot to learn. Business can learn from government and government can learn from business. We learned, for example, that we have an incredible capacity to reinvent ourselves. You have a great capacity to reinvent yourself as a business, right? That gives us a lot of confidence as governments because we know that we have a resilient business sector that can face these challenges head on. But interdependency, very important lesson of COVID-19.
Can I just build? Do you mind if I just build on that, Brian?
Sure.
I really love that concept because how I'm interpreting the mayor's principle is interdependency amongst us. But even if at a more macroeconomic perspective, our overdependence on the U.S. as a trading partner, I think, has made an element of sobriety for us that we need to diversify our trading partner. It's a different answer, but it's another take on that we have to diversify export markets within where we're getting our products to in the global market. So right now we see the U.S. protectionism happening down south, a closure of the border, invoking Defense Act measures that are at least attempted to prohibit the ability of getting product dutifully destined for Canada. And so I think from a macro and more from a provincial perspective, a lesson learned as well. Of course, I agree totally with the mayor on the health imperative. That's number one. It always must be. But we've got to make sure that Ontario enterprises, Canadian enterprises, are able to reach new markets, that they have a competitive advantage. And so I totally agree that we need to be looking medium term to ensure the success of the sector and of our job creators who are taking risks. Part of that will be ensuring they have the capital liquidity to succeed through this phase. But it's also about making sure that we retain an advantage. And I think in the post-COVID world, as the mayor said, yes, there's inherent risk, but there's also a significant amount of opportunity for Canadian industry that is dynamic and fairly agile that can overcome the challenge.
Yeah.
Brian, can I jump in too, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. And then I'm going to come back to you with a follow-up question.
No worries. So what I wanted to do is just build on the two comments, the two before me. It is very, very much a process of revealing where our challenges and vulnerabilities are. We've, as Minister LECCE has said and the mayor has said, it shows us where we have had challenges in getting supply. I would just make mention where we may have reduced our investment in, let's just say, what's happening in long-term care is a huge concern to me right now, and to our government and to all governments. That is not acceptable, and it is revealing where we have opportunities for significant improvement and where we need to make investment. So it has been an exercise in putting money into the system. We put $500 billion on the table and in infusion to provide that liquidity and credit across Canada. And as the mayor has said, I think it's really shown the value in governments and the value in governments not looking to the bottom line, but looking to how to make sure we keep Canadians safe and we keep our economy in a good position so that it can pick up quickly once we get through this. But it has been also revealed how we all need to work together. And that's not just governments, that's industry, that business, and obviously individuals. So I just want to say it's been inspiring to watch how Canada has pulled together at all levels, and we are moving through this in a fast way. Obviously, we haven't seen the surge that other countries have seen in our healthcare system, so we're turning those resources very quickly. I understand in Ontario and other provinces very quickly to the long-term care and their assisted living facilities to make sure that we're addressing the pandemic where it is hitting hardest. But I just want to assure people that we are there for them. We are working hard for them. We don't have it all right out the gate, but we are continuing to work and improve those programs and processes that we've put in place. And we're going to need their help. I mean, everybody's part of this, and all that staying at home, staying physically distant is critical for us to get through this quickly. So everyone has a role to play, and I thank everyone for playing that role so well. Thanks.
I totally agree with you. What I'm going to do just to, because I know you have other things you have to do today and get back to hopefully helping the business community and everybody. I'm going to ask you each one final question, and then I will come back to each of you for a quick wrap up if you wanted to add anything. So I want to start with you, Minister Schulte. Considering that you are the Minister of Seniors, I felt it would be remiss not to ask you about seniors. The question we got was that our senior population in Vaughan, as everywhere in Canada, has been adversely affected by the COVID-19. What advice do you have for families looking to provide support for their loved ones while respecting social distancing rules?
So we've been very clear that, families should not be going and visiting their elder members, okay? They can be supporting them, and they should be supporting them by providing, groceries, and, if they have to take them, they need to take them to medical appointments or even to shopping. They need to practice very, very careful hand washing and hygiene regimen. Now it's being suggested that it might be helpful for you to wear a mask, not to protect you, but to have you protect who you're with. So, if you're going to have to go into one of your older family members' homes, practice your hand washing the minute you walk in that house, practice your social distancing, practice even wearing a mask if you're able to do that. These are things that we would be recommending. We don't want seniors to be isolated. We want them to be well supported, but we need to do it safely. So that would be the advice that I would give. Get on the phone, get on the Skype. I have a mother-in-law in long-term care and a father-in-law that is in a seniors assisted living residence. And we are on with them every other day to make sure that we know that they're safe and that they know that they're loved. And if you look at the ways that Canadians are being incredibly creative at supporting their loved ones, their elder loved ones, without actually getting close to them, it's been very inspiring. So just keep up the great work out there and support your senior loved ones and keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Minister LECCE, similar in the sense you're Minister of Education, so we definitely wanted to ask you an education-related question. Before we started recording, you all saw my 4-year-old daughter come on screen and say hi. And it's a question for all those parents out there. I think what the province has done is pretty remarkable to move all students to online learning. So I give the government a lot of credit. And we're also hearing from a lot of parents that are trying to continue to keep their jobs and work from home and be successful at that and continue to pay taxes. And they're still effectively doing education for their children as the education system does move online. So just wanted to ask you about your plans for further developing what's being offered online and support that parents are getting.
Yeah, and just before I do that, I just want to totally agree with Deb, give a shout out to the frontline workers within our long-term care and seniors homes. My grandmother is in long-term care. She's at Mackenzie Health, and just a 30-second story. It was her 96th birthday. Of course, the province put long-term care on a lockdown, and so we couldn't visit her. And it was devastating not to be there with her. And one of the workers within that long-term care facility, it's run by Universal Care, and they just amazing thing. They FaceTimed all of her grandchildren. And that 15 minutes was honestly probably the best 15 minutes she's had this year. So really special to see her smile. And it's little things like that that I think speak volumes about the sense of compassion of everyone dealing with this. With respect to education, we've unveiled a Learn at Home program. That phase, the second phase of which commenced recently post-March break, is really designed to repatriate the responsibility of education back to the educator, obviously in conjunction and partnership with parents. It's using virtual learning and technology to reach people. We've come up with a pretty, I think, high standard in this province, certainly when you benchmark it across the country, the highest, if you will, of what we expect and what the guarantees are for parents. You know the themes your child will focus on academically. You will know the amount of hours per week. And you also know the mechanism by which they'll reach them. If is it a Google Classroom? Is it is it a phone call for some folks who may not have access to broadband? But the point is, we're universalizing to the teacher-student relationship. That's really important. We're emphasizing STEM education, which is critical from an economic perspective of just enabling our young people to have those skill sets that they can then utilize in post-secondary and obviously in the job market when they're complete their studies. So that program is well underway. I appreciate that this is an imperfect solution to a very grand problem we all face, but I think it's a solid start with the recognition that we're going to keep scaling it up and building it up. We've used TVO and TFO. Those are two agencies that fall under my ministry. Repurpose them exclusively for educational content all day, every day. We've been able to work with a variety of partners from Apple to Google to great Canadian success stories right here in Ontario, using their educational materials that are free and bilingual and accessible, putting those online at the ontario.ca/learn-at-home website. So creating a portal of content. So, my hope is that children continue to learn. That's our expectation. They're going to continue to graduate. For those parents in grade 12, worry not. We've got a plan to make sure they graduate and get into post-secondary. We're working with the Minister of Colleges and Universities. And we're going to continue to be as reasonable as possible to make sure kids remain focused on learning. We just can't accept the premise that they should go home for 1 or 2 or 3 months and wish them all the best. And some provinces have done that, but I think in Ontario, we've got to really rise to the challenge and think big and be bold. And I think we have.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, one of the questions we got, I'll theme it because it's actually part of a larger segment of questions. It's just about to do with social distancing. People saying that they respect the fact that it's so important to stay home and only go out when absolutely necessary unless you're an essential worker, but that they're still seeing too many people out near playgrounds, or they even one person referenced grocery stores. There's too many people at grocery stores. Well, I recognize people do need to go to those. So just the question was, what's being done in terms of enforcement to ensure that people are taking this as seriously as possible to flatten the curve faster for everybody else?
Brian, just a few days ago, we lowered the flags at City Hall in memory of all the people that have passed away, not just in the city of Vaughan, but globally. We have to do everything that we can to stop the spread of COVID-19. So I recently moved a bylaw. We enacted a bylaw that would include fines from $500 to $100,000 for people who are violating this bylaw. The issue here is a question of responsibility. I happen to think, quite frankly, that the people that are not following these rules, are not following the advice of medical officers, they are not following the advice of experts, lack self-respect and respect for others. And my preference would have been not to punish people like that, but because the vast majority of people follow the rules in the city of Vaughan, but when I saw evidence that this was still going on, I was not going to reward bad behavior. And that is the reason why I pushed for those changes. And I will continue to, and we'll come down hard. The enforcement is occurring as we speak, and people need to understand that we can't lose human lives because people show no care towards other people. You can't have a careless lifestyle at a time when the entire world is faced with COVID-19. Those are important considerations. So as mayor of a city that is facing a global pandemic, and we are an international city, and people understand what that means when it relates to COVID-19, we have to take some harsh measures because they are required. So every person, every time that we break up people who are not practicing social distancing, it's the right step towards defeating COVID-19. This is a very principle-driven approach towards government. We have to be consistent. What is the clarity that we must have? The clarity is that we need to stop the spread. How do you do it? Every level of government has different tools, and so we use those tools, and that's what we're doing at the city of Vaughan. And I can tell you, one of the lessons of COVID-19 for us as a city has been how important it is to dedicate resources to emergency preparedness. And as you know, we were the first large municipality in the province of Ontario to declare a state of emergency. We're one of the first ones to open up emergency operation centers and close down city amenities within parks. We have been very proactive, and we have been proactive with the tools that we have been given. And so people recognize that we are very serious about stopping the spread, because it is what we can do to alleviate the problem. But remember, every time I see those flags half-mast in memory of those who have passed away, I tell you, that's a very strong message for people to be mindful that human lives are at stake. And for the life of me, I don't understand why some people don't understand it.
Fair enough. Now, I know you guys, we have to wrap up. So I'm just going to throw to Minister LECCE for a concluding remark, come back to Minister Schulte, and then Mayor. And thank you all in advance for agreeing to do this and keep up supporting both the residential and the business community. Thank you. Minister LECCE.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say I 100% agree with the mayor on that. I think people want us to be as tough as we can on those few bad apples in our community, but it obviously speaks volumes that the majority of people are being incredibly compliant, and they get it, that it's serious and existential, and that they're doing it for their families, for their communities, and that's certainly something we all value. I'll be very brief. Thank you to the Chamber for really being an advocate for small businesses and job creators and risk takers in the community. We're really blessed. We have a very entrepreneurial community, but it's not just about the entrepreneurs and the employers. It's also about the employees that you represent. And we're really committed to making sure all of you are able to get through this. We're going to continue to work across party lines and levels of government, leverage every opportunity to help ensure your sustainability. We're going to continue to unveil new programs and supports and direct financing over the coming weeks. But I think priority number one is let's contain this pandemic. Let's flatten the curve. Let's do our part so that we can restore some normalcy in the economy and in society, in our schools. And that's really job number one. So we're going to continue to focus on that under the medical advice of our Chief Medical Officer. And thank you both to the Mayor and to Deb Schulte, just really working incredibly hard through this. And it's a pleasure to serve with you. And I know, like the public servants here, we're very grateful to our frontline workers and the people in our hospitals and our communities making a difference. So thank you. And of course, my office is available. If anything we can do to help you, send us an email at stephen.lecce@pc.ola.org, and we'll be in touch with you to help.
Thank you. Minister Schulte.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding repetitive, I want to pick up on both Minister LECCE and the Mayor. The most important thing that people need to do right now is to stay home as much as possible and to practice physical distancing. It really is a matter of life and death. I can't emphasize that more. This is so important. Most are doing an excellent job, and we can see that we are starting to bend the curve. At least we are hoping. Based on the recent data, it looks hopeful, but we cannot let up our guard there. I want to just say that while you're doing your part, the governments are working together to make sure that we're doing our part to help you get through this. So, and as Minister LECCE said, working night and day, there'll be new programs, there'll be new things coming out as we move through this process. So just be aware that we haven't stopped just because we've got a few things out there. We're working on what comes next. I want to thank you, Brian, for organizing this and the Vaughan Chamber. It's been really great to have this opportunity to reach out in this way, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you very much, Minister Lecce and Mayor, for being such incredible partners in the work that we do for the community. And it's been really great to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Mayor.
Brian, first of all, let me express my gratitude to you and my warmest and sincerest gratitude to everyone who are basically our partners in the fight against COVID-19, the essential workers. I mean, the gratitude I can spread everywhere because, you know, I spoke about interdependency. We really are in this together. Practice, you know, social distancing, physical distancing. I think that everybody knows what we need to do, and just get it done. Just do it. I mean, be responsible. But I do want to say, I want to leave on an hopeful note. You know, for the past 8 to 10 years, the city of Vaughan at an unemployment rate of around 4.3%, economic growth at 4%. We created 60,000 jobs over the past 10 years, 225,000 jobs with 12,000 businesses. That DNA is within us. That spirit of entrepreneurship is within us. We're going to come out of this perhaps even stronger than other communities because we have that entrepreneurial spirit. And so in the same way that we may lose some jobs, there's no question about the fact that we have the capacity to be innovators, to be creators of opportunity. And that is the message that I want to leave with you, Brian, and your entire, the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce, its membership, and the 12,000 businesses, that we're going to get out of this. And that same makeup that we have will win against COVID-19. I look forward to the day where unemployment is once again, 4.3%, 4%, or economic growth will be 4%. We know there's going to be a period where it's not going to be. But I also know the potential that lies within us. And that gives me a lot of confidence.
Thank you so much. You're all incredibly well-spoken. You were all frank and honest. And I appreciate you going into some of the specific programs. We appreciate you'll continue to consider challenges being faced by the business community and the community at large. Thank you again, Minister SCHULTE, Minister Lecce, Honourable Mayor MAURIZIO BEVILACQua. Thank you and see you all soon. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.